Namaste and welcome to Thrive, the live chat series brought to you by Greeniche Health. I'm your host, Annu Gaidhu, registered Ayurvedic health practitioner and yoga teacher. I'm so excited to be hosting this series to you brought to you by Greeniche. Greeniche is one company that believes in sharing the positivity and knowledge of health and wellness within the community whenever we can and throughout whatever circumstances are going on. Join me each week as we speak and interview guests from the city who are going to be sharing with us what they're doing right now as they adjust to the new normal. I'm so excited to have this chat with Bianca Metz, who is somebody that is just so special in terms of something that's so required right now, sustainable and minimalist living. She's a small space designer, a tiny home advocate, and believes in the love of sustainable living. And right now, we couldn't have had this guest on at such a better time. So with all further ado, please help me welcome Bianca onto the show. Namaste and welcome to Thrive, the live chat series brought to you by Greeniche Health. I'm your host, Annu Gaidhu, registered Ayurvedic and yoga practitioner. I'm so excited to be able to share our next guest with you. Her name is Bianca Metz, and she is somebody that's so special who is going to talk to us about how her journey of sustainable and minimalistic living has enhanced her life, not only just personally, but as a business as well. And she's just a wonderful soul to connect with, to learn more about how we can infuse minimalist living and sustainable living into our households today during this time, especially with COVID going on. So without further ado, please help me welcome Bianca onto the show. Hi, Bianca.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So good, thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to be chatting with you. I'm just moving right now in the midst of it, and speaking to somebody who is just all about sustainable and minimalistic living is the key, I think, that I need right now in this process. So thank you so much. I know everybody else who's listening is also excited as well. And so without further ado, I just kind of wanted to ask you just a little bit more about yourself, if you can share your journey and just kind of where you're at and more about your business and what you do.
Sure, of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. So excited to talk to you today. So my name is Bianca Metz. I'm a sustainable living specialist, a tiny house consultant, and I work in home organizing and assisting people with moving. So I have a few arms to my business, but mainly my family and I live in a tiny house on 6 acres of land in the Dundas Valley. And so we act as land stewards on this property. We take care of bees and chickens and the gardens and the greenhouse that are there. And so we care for the land, and everything that we're doing and everything that we've done is kind of based off of doing that and kind of creating this lifestyle for us. So living in harmony with nature, living small, downsizing, living minimally is kind of is our lifestyle now.
I love that because, in Ayurveda, that's living in harmony with nature is just key and fundamental to health and just understanding more even about yourself. And so I just wanted to ask out of curiosity, other than you growing up in such an environment, was this always something of your interest to turn it into a business, or was that something that flourished as a result of maybe your interests?
Yeah, so it kind of all started with my husband. My husband is a wilderness outdoor educator. He's a canoe guide. He works with Montessori adolescent children or adolescents at an outdoor school. And so he's always been kind of a man of the wilderness, and he's always loved nature and appreciated nature and appreciated its gifts. So he's just an old soul in that way. And so our relationship has really brought us together in that direction. But the kind of pinnacle moment for me to, find myself in slow living was when I had my son. So Bodhi, my son, is 3 years old. He was actually born 6 weeks early.
Okay.
And so having him 6 weeks early, I really attributed this to my overwork. I worked. I used to work as a wedding and event coordinator, and I worked on my feet 12, 13 hours a day, and I wasn't listening to my body, and I wasn't slowing down. And I feel, premature birth is oftentimes attributed to our overwork. And so I was so upset with myself, and I was upset that I needed, for finances, for keeping up with the Joneses, all of these different reasons. I was just upset that I let myself get to the point where this unfortunate circumstance happened, and whether or not it was fully overworking, it definitely contributed to it. So after this, I just said no more. I just said no, and I need to slow down. I need to focus on my family. I need to focus on myself and my own self-care, and just really at the end of the day, be happy, which kind of living in harmony with nature and adopting this type of lifestyle and living minimally really does that.
Yeah, I can imagine, because decluttering my space has been not only therapeutic for me, but just feeling like I've lost pounds or something, I feel, in the process. And so I'm just curious to know about the connection in terms of tiny living, and living in like a tiny house. And I know before we had started our chat as well, there was like a little bit of difficulties that we were having, and you had mentioned, small living space problems and stuff like that, which I thought was hilarious. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Just, your favorite part of living in a tiny home, and just how you came about even the idea.
Yeah. So my husband and I were living in a condo, and we own the condo, owns that condo. And we were just, living, we were strapped. We were both, working, but still just monthly expenses were way too much. And so we came to the realization that, we want to live differently, and if we're going to do that, we have to think differently, and we have to think outside of the formula. Everyone is always after the bigger house and the better car and more, and it's killing us, and it's killing us spatially, mentally, and otherwise. And so we just decided to just go the opposite direction. And so it oftentimes feels like we're swimming upstream, but you can tell a lot of people are following us. And so when we decided, what does this look like? What does this journey look like for us, for downsizing or finding, a way to live closer to nature, so our son can have access to nature and we can have its gifts. And so my husband came up with the tiny house idea, or a yurt or some kind of other small dwelling. And I was immediately, yes, on board. Let's do it, whatever it takes. I mean, I'm an organizational specialist, so we made it happen quick. And so that's how we found ourselves in the tiny house. We have had a really great opportunity to live on this piece of land and take care of it. And then, plant gardens to grow our own food, and introduce bees to the property to, increase pollination and different things. And so we just kind of found this formula of what we wanted. And then we just kind of put all the pieces together, and living in a tiny house was one of those pieces. And I love it. It is incredible. I get extremely anxious when I'm in bigger houses. There's so much room and there's so many things. It's incredible. I love it. I love that, I don't have a lot to clean. I don't have a lot of things. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
I was just going to say that, I was going to ask you some of the benefits that you had figured before. You had just mentioned a few right now. Because for me, the first thing that stuck out was just a bigger house means there's a bigger mess to clean, and likely more spaces that you don't even know of that are collecting dust, So I have always been fond of the smaller spaces as well. And I just wanted to know if anybody is looking to even start maybe their own journey in starting a tiny home, where would they begin? What would be something you would suggest?
So the act of downsizing is really an art. And so a downsizing doesn't necessarily mean moving from a bigger space to a smaller space. It means kind of just getting rid of what is giving you that overwhelm. So we oftentimes think about this concept. It's decision fatigue. And so if you think about all of the things in your life that are causing you so much stress, even from the second you wake up in the morning, what is the first place you go to? It's your bathroom, to go to the bathroom. If your bathroom is cluttered, you're already starting off your day in a mess. Then you head to your closet. And oftentimes we find that we have so many clothes and nothing to wear. That's decision fatigue. That is our consumptive habits just filling our space with things that we don't need. Then, we go to make breakfast and we look in our full fridge and our full cupboards and we have so much food, but we have nothing to eat. That's because we're not making the choices that are right for us. We're not making the choices that make sense as, our habits. We're not buying the right things. We're not fueling our bodies in the right way. We're not listening to ourselves. And so to go from where you are now to living more minimally, it doesn't necessarily mean to find yourself in a tiny space. It's definitely, I would say, a goal. And, if you want to save for the future and you want to save for retirement and you want to reduce that monthly financial stress, downsizing physically is the most, it's a really great way to get there. But in terms of tangible things that people can do, it's honestly just start with what is giving you the most stress. I know, oftentimes we find parents who have so many things for their children. Start decluttering those items. You have a huge wardrobe. We can talk about what a capsule wardrobe looks like. There are so many different things that you can do to make those day-to-day choices easier. And then in terms of making your financial stress easier, it's just talking about what your consumption habits look like and where you're spending money, where you don't even notice that it's disappearing, and how can you earn back that money by changing your mindset. So there are so many different things that you can do for sure to kind of to start the journey.
I really loved what you had said just about, you made a reference to waking up in the morning, and if you go to the washroom and your space is decluttered, then you're just kind of starting off the day with that energy. And, I never really looked so much into the environment and an awareness about how the environment is going to impact me and my mental health. And so I'm actually just exploring that connection this year. And I just wanted to ask you, based on what you had said, do you believe that it's connected, and what have you found in your experience with it?
Oh my goodness. Yes. What an amazing question. Yes. So one of the biggest things that we're going to find with our relationship with ourselves and with nature and everything in between is that the connection with environmental issues and this eco-anxiety and eco-despair that we're all feeling right now is a connection with nature. And so one of the things that I always tell people, and I always challenge them with this question, is if you don't have a relationship with nature, how are you going to want to protect it? Because if you don't understand its gifts, if you don't understand how precious it is, if you don't understand how what we're doing poisons the water and the ground, and living big is producing, carbon emissions and driving our car, all of these different things, it is very overwhelming. It is, of course, it's overwhelming, but it's really a matter of just getting out into nature and appreciating it and understanding it, and not just for its recreational activities, but for sure for just what it is, and seeing that, things look differently than they did 20 years ago. There are not a lot of species around. Bird population is declining. Waterways are poisoned, and that's all because we're not making the right decisions. And so it is a lot. And I talk a lot about nature and the connection there, I think. Understanding what our actions how our actions are affecting everything, and then how nature is and the environment is then, affecting us.
I think what you had said is just so important, and I can't emphasize that enough, because even in all of my recommendations for clients that I see who are coming with, different type of health problems, without fail, I'll always say connection to nature. You need to enhance or, somehow just start to integrate nature more into your everyday lifestyle, like little grounding techniques and things that don't really require much, but just your own awareness and your own commitment to be able to follow through with it. So I love that, because once you start doing that, you start to notice the different seasons and the different, colors and just everything that's sensory that we're so tuned out of on a regular basis, right?
Yes.
Man, that's amazing. you already talk about the whole connection with nature in terms of what you can do with your house. I'm wondering what people that are living in the city, what they can do to kind of foster the same thing, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things you can do is just bring nature indoors and find a really cohesive way to do that. So I find that, there's so many ways we can make our home more green and, healthy. The air quality in condo buildings and large apartment buildings, all the air is circulating itself, and that's scary given the time that we're in. And so bringing in plant life, and I would highly recommend native plant life. So those wouldn't be necessarily tropical plants and different things, which are great, and I have those too. But understanding that native plants and different perennials and different things we can find in our own backyard are going to kind of help us, give us the connection to what is already outside. And so and what belongs outside. And so, bringing in more plant life. And I know everyone always jokes that no one can ever take care of a plant. And it's just a matter of setting yourself up to do that. Don't toss your plants in the corner and expect them to live. Put them beside your sink and put them in your bathroom it's near a water source, different things like that. Live walls are also a really great way, living walls. Starting your own indoor garden. I mean, it's so easy to be able to do that on your patio. There are so many plants that don't require a lot of light that you can still grow with. And then the obvious, which is to just get outdoors in any way possible. I find that, you're triggered when you go out into the concrete jungle and then you head out into nature. Notice the way that makes you feel. Notice the way that those green spaces make you feel and how you breathe easier and you feel better and you can listen to the birds and you can hear the leaves rustle. So you have to make time to get outside. And so there are definitely different ways to do it. My highest recommendation is obviously to just find those green spaces and go there and sit, take a blanket, take a book, do what you can. But adopting this mindset and adopting this way of life will help you find the time to do that, because then you're prioritizing your mental health and you're prioritizing time in nature, and then you'll only just find more time to do it.
That's how I feel. Like, it's just kind of, even if you can't make the time or space, I find even activities like the butterfly conservatory and just things that are outside that'll get you connected that are still fun to do. What a great recommendation. I have a question for you, because I'm finding this whole moving process to be difficult, like in my own personal life. And I can't imagine doing this if I had children. And so as a wife and mother, I just wanted to know, has family impacted your decisions in any which way of how I know you shared about your husband before, but now that you have your son, other than what you had shared in the beginning, is there currently some things that encourage you to make decisions that are guided by your family?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think setting boundaries is really important. Boundary setting for a family unit, when we get married and you have children and you in your life makes those different movements. I find that it's harder to remain in the sanctity of your values and your beliefs. And so setting boundaries with even friends and families and telling them, and not setting boundaries as in, I do this, I don't do this. You're just kind of being and educating and holding space for other people to come into your life and see what it is that you're doing. Especially for us, living alternatively is not always seen as a desirable way to live. There are a lot of people who look at my lifestyle and go, thank you. But then there's a lot of people who just say, okay, wow, she's doing it right. And so for family, we've had so much support, our extended family and otherwise. There have definitely been, some questions saying, okay, well, are you going to be able to have another baby in the tiny house? Are you going to? And so those are all just things that we will deal with when we can. And I mean, I bed shared and I co-slept, and I followed a super European kind of just like back to basics way of motherhood in the first year. And so all I needed was a bed and my feeding source, and that's it. So the greatest thing about building a good foundation in your family, my husband being one of them, is that we are we're so connected, and we take that path together and we follow that path. It's also very difficult living in a tiny space with another human, and my husband's not a small guy, is tough. you know, it's not all rainbows and butterflies, but that's just about the people you surround yourself with. So in terms of family, you know, we've made a lot of our good friends are our family, and they support us and they love us and they just enrich us, and we all just learn from each other.
I love how you mentioned that, you know, it's only so much space, and then you have another human there that's with you. Is that something that you would say is important to recognize? Like, also the things, if you are going to be decluttering or you are going to be maybe moving into a new space, to consider also the bodies that are coming into that space or that might be joining you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we moved into the tiny house with Bodhi, and he's at such a stage where, you know, he's not 5 years old, 7 years old. He's going to grow, and he's going to grow into this space as well. So not only do I have to practice minimalism to the highest extent, but I also have to take into consideration another human's development. And the greatest thing about having the tiny house is that you are limited to your space, which means what? I'm outside. And I'm outside with Bodhi. Bodhi's in the garden, and Bodhi's outside with, you know, Daddy chopping down trees. Well, he's not chopping down trees. Moms are going to go run away scared. You know, and he's doing those things, and he's doing what we're doing, and he's not in front of a screen, even though he definitely gets screen time, and he doesn't have a ton of toys to stimulate him with, even though he does have toys. And so, yeah, that really comes into play. We definitely would like to have another child, and so if we're lucky enough for that, then, you know, that's gonna just, for me, I have the most space in the world. Whereas other people would say, "Oh no, where's the baby gonna go? Where's the crib gonna go?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?" And so it's for me, I find a sense of calm in all that panic, and I can just really see the space the way that it is, and we'll obviously upsize, or we'll add an addition to it, and different things. But I mean, 240 square feet is just plenty of space.
My goodness. I'm like, so I grew up hearing that like 3,500 square feet was big, you know, because I'm also coming from like a middle class family, in the sense of we looked at luxuries of such a kind, but then also it's like once you get there, you realize how much you don't really want that at all, right? Because it's just so much more extra problems that come along with wanting more, I guess you can say. And I think a lot of honoring your space has to do with honoring yourself and honoring what's right for you, and what kind of nourishes you to feel your ultimate and optimal self, right? And so I'm wondering if there's a connection with self-love or self-care in terms of even like therapeutically. I find strangely sometimes washing dishes and cleaning, you know, like that's like my forte, and people are always like spooked by that because they can't understand for the life of me, but I find it therapeutic at times too. And so do you also have something similar, or do you have a self-love practice that you honor?
Absolutely. I get, you know, this question is always all over, you know, the media, and there's a challenge with self-care, and there's a challenge with self-love, and that if you're not practicing something that has nothing to do with, you know, your day-to-day humdrum activities, then you're not necessarily, for lack of a better term, doing it right. And for me, I feel the complete opposite. Like you said, I find so much therapy in cleaning my house. Every single morning when I drop off Bodhi from school, I come home and I take 10 minutes and I clean the house. I clean up from breakfast. I put all the dishes away. I sweep the floor. I organize my space. I make a coffee, and I sit down and I start work. And, you know, if I can take that moment to go, I spend so much time outside that going for a walk is not therapeutic for me. That going for a hike by myself is not therapeutic for me. I find I attribute it to, you know, I work in weddings and events, and I'm on my feet walking for 13 hours a day, and then people challenge me to go to the gym. Well, why don't you go and work out? Come to the gym with me. And I said, no, thanks. I've got 40,000 steps a day. I'm good. I don't need to go and walk or do anything more. And so it's this concept of what we think is self-care and self-love in terms of what we're actually doing that's filling us. For me, having my house clean and organized, because it really only does take me 10 minutes. Again, I'm limited to my space, so I'm limited to the fact that that is not taking a lot of time. It makes me feel so good to do those kind of things. Other than that, spending time in the garden this summer was the most therapeutic thing I could ever do. Learning about plants. I had never planted a garden in my life. I didn't know anything about plants. I was the one who killed plants inside. There was not, I went for a hike and we go camping, and that was our experience in nature. Or my husband's way deeper. But I found that learning, about that there's a male and a female species, and they make seeds, which are their babies, to carry on their lineage. And it was just like the amount of love I felt for the plants just made me feel so good. And then to be able to consume their gifts was just so amazing. And so in that, definitely taking the time to do those things, for me, that's self-care. I love it because I feel so good when I clean my house and everything is spatially organized. I can relax.
So many things I'm just like dying to say, because you know what? It's like, first of all, with the whole, I can definitely empathize with coming home, like after you have your responsibilities, but then when it comes to you and doing your work, it's like you need just whatever outlet it is to get you in that zone, and then you can start the rest of the day. And for me, it's also cleaning, because I find that like my mind is so cluttered that my space can't be cluttered. I need the space to be at least clean, some sort of calm in the chaos. And so that I can start getting this going and a little bit less anxious. So I just, I feel like, I wanted to ask you just about this year in particular and what that looked like. And you had mentioned a little bit about gardening and being able to explore that more. But is there any like challenge you would say which has been by far one of the greatest ones this year in particular as it relates to COVID that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge was definitely, I think, truthfully, really the only challenge personally that I felt was mourning the loss of our life as we know it, if that makes sense. So not being able to see my friends, not being able to have time to work on my business, not being able to, go to concerts or go and do all of the things so for me, I mourn the loss of that. And it took, a little bit to get over that. But then it all just turned into successes. And so because we had built this life for ourselves in the last, year and a half, we were so prepared for COVID. And in that, I mean, we learned how to live a self-reliant lifestyle, and we learned how to build self-resiliency, and we learned how to live differently. So when it came time to, battening down the hatches and staying at home, not having access to a lot of food, maybe not having access to meat or produce and all of these different things that were a reality for a lot of people, we found that we weren't worried about it because we had our supplier. We have a friend who owns an organic farm nearby that we have a weekly order from. He was still no problem going to send out those orders. We have another, a meat supplier, a local farm, small family farm where we have a meat order every week. We didn't have to go to the grocery store for very much other than the snacks. And of course the LCBO for the requisite wine. And so we found that we were okay because we had already supported local, and we already built these different things into our lifestyle. And so not only that, but we were starting a garden. So the challenge of not having access to food was completely fine. By mid-July, we had almost $10 to $15 worth of produce coming out of our garden, and our garden was, 20 feet by 10 feet, 20 by 20, something like that, which is a big garden, don't get me wrong. But yeah, so the challenges, we really just, we kind of took them with grace, and we had already implemented certain things in our life that just made it even easier for us to get through the pandemic. And I think a lot of people were really starting to assess their space. A lot of people were not happy with their four walls. They were not happy with what was in their four walls, and maybe even who was in their four walls. And so there's so many people, who've come out of the pandemic saying, I have assessed my life more than I wish I would have in the last 3 months, and it is time for a change. So there is this huge movement towards purposeful living and towards minimalism and towards this way of living, because we have finally realized that our stuff is not going to save us. And kind of that is, I think, the biggest challenge for a lot of other people. And yeah.
That's amazing. You know, like I loved everything that you were saying, because it really does force you to assess without, you know, you can't really run away from it. You have to stay inside. And I find that especially people who are working from home as well, to differentiate the space of being like, okay, I'm going to now tap into my work mode, and then now having to go back to family, and playing these different roles in the day, these different hats, and just trying to keep it all together. Has been challenging to say the least, you know. And ultimately, I just loved everything that you were saying. So I just wanted to have people know a little bit more about your business, the Giving Tree family. And if you can just share, if there's one message or one takeaway, something that you want people to learn or know that represents your brand, please share it.
Of course. I think everything that I do is rooted in sustainability and multi-purpose and purposeful spaces. And so as I mentioned, I do have a lot of arms to my business as a tiny house consultant, helping others find their version of tiny living, and then on the flip side, actually physically helping people who, you know, are moving, organizing, decluttering, all of those different things. We find that we declutter most when we move, so that's kind of where that niche lies. And so, with the approach that I use for organization and the approach that I use for people finding a more simple, slow life, it's honestly rooted in just knowing that all you need is less, and that you don't need everything, and you don't need things to make you happy. And money is, at the end of the day, really not going to do anything for us. Building a strong foundation with each other, and building a strong foundation with nature, and really just, you know, appreciating the outdoors and learning what it takes to save it. And so if that, at the end of the day, my goal in my business is to become irrelevant one day.
Oh my goodness. Oh no, are you still here? I think it just kind of, there you are. You're back, right?
There we go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I had two random questions that came up that I just wanted to know. You know, I've kind of been curious about, what do you do with the mess after you declutter? Do you donate it?
Yeah, so there's a scale of sustainability that I use in my business. So there's a few different scales. The number one thing that I want, well, I'd like to kind of put forth with when it comes to purging and decluttering, is that getting rid of your items is actually one of the most unsustainable things to do, because oftentimes that item is not landing in a place where it's going to be utilized. Now, if it's not being utilized in your home, and you want to get rid of it, there are certain, you know, formulas you can follow. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do is sell it, because if someone else is buying something, that means they're finding value in that item and they're going to use it, which means it's going to go to a good place and not the dump. Number two would be giving it away. And giving it away to someone who, again, is going to use it, a friend or a family. And the reason that sell is number one is because that's bringing value, monetary value, back to you. And then the third one is to either, if the item is no longer usable, and you've tried to donate it, or you've tried to donate it to a place that, you know, does refurbishing and different things like that, or you've tried to give it away for free online to someone deserving, then that item is truly garbage, then it can go to the dump, or it can be recycled in specific ways. Recycling is always one of the last options, even though people, you know, we've been trained to think that recycling is the greatest solution to our garbage, and it's not. Unfortunately, it goes to such terrible places, and not a lot of things are recyclable. But you know, so those are kind of the ways that we get rid of our things. And so that is, for me specifically in my business, I help people do that. So one of the things that I love to do is clean messes, especially with working in weddings and events. Having everything look perfect and taking that stress away from the people who are there is priority number one. So even the people who come to decorate their boxes, let me get rid of that for you. Let me do all of these different things. And so for my clients, I actually have a truck and a trailer that I take, and I take things day of. So the last thing, you know, it's great, you can purge, you can clean, you can reorganize, but then if you're still kind of left with those boxes, a reminder of this, now I have to do this, now maybe I don't have a car, a truck to get rid of it, then you're kind of just stuck and you're now still limited to all of these different things. So I
start opening up the boxes, like taking it back inside. Like
exactly. So I take it all with me, and then you trust that with my care for the environment that I get rid of it
awesome.
The way I'm supposed to.
And you know what? Now that you're a new plant mom, I wanted to know, what are your favorite plants? Like, what are some of the things that you're keeping in your garden?
Okay, my favorite plant. Yes, so inside I have, ironically, I was talking about tropicals. I have a Bodhi tree. So my girlfriends bought me a 2-year-old Bodhi tree for Bodhi on his 2nd birthday. So Bodhi is named after the Buddhist Bodhi tree, the tree of enlightenment, that we see in all of Buddha's photos. And so I have that tree. It is my favorite tree. And it's funny because I feel like you love woo-woo, so I'm going to tell you. We kept the Bodhi tree outside all summer, and a little bit. We just brought it inside about 3 weeks ago, and it did not grow. It grew like maybe 3 leaves. The second we brought it into our home, it has grown a half a foot.
Oh my goodness!
In 2 weeks in our house. Goodness. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether I have a feeling it's the energy. It's warm in our house.
Like you're a new plant mom, it's the energy.
Totally the energy, not the fact that it's warm in our house, and Bodhi trees love a warm climate. That's not anything to do with it.
No.
But I'm going with the energy from our home. So we the Bodhi tree I love. In my garden, you'll find I started a medicinal plant garden this year that I fell in love with. So yarrow is one of my favorite plants, and I just have sprinkled that everywhere on the property because I'm so excited. And so yarrow, I had Roman chamomile in the garden that I really loved. We had borage that grew exponentially into a huge bush. And then, honestly, I had a special connection with some of the plants that I grew from seed. All of the plants I grew from seed, because I planted those in March, and then they were still fruiting up until 2 weeks ago. So that's over half a year of like my little babies.
Connection, yeah. That's what I was saying. I'm like, there has to be favorites. I know there is. Just like how we say we don't have favorites when it comes to kids, but I'm like, there has to be some. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. If you can tell us a little bit more about where we can find you online and what kind of services are available to us through you.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at The Giving Tree Family, thegivingtree.tinyhome on Instagram, and then on Facebook as well, just The Giving Tree. And if you search thegivingtree.tinyhome, that'll come up on Facebook. My website is thegivingtreefamily.com. You can find all my services on the website. So I have again, some of the arms you'll find on the website. So Tiny House Consulting is one of them. I offer free 15-minute consultations, and the same with home organization and moving. So I work closely with realtors as a referred client. So anytime they book a client, then I go in and I assist, and I kind of get deeper in there and get those houses ready for listing, especially quick listing. And then that way that gives the client a lot of time to have someone else do the hard work so they can list quicker. And so realtors can find that, other people who are looking to organize their home and move. And then obviously I have, private clients who are just looking to declutter, looking to, reshape their home, redesign their home. I work specifically in small space design. So I kind of connect how people habitually move based on their flow, based on what they have in their home, and just have their home work better for them with what they have. And that oftentimes includes decluttering a lot of things. And so, they can find all that online.
That's super cool, and I wanted to just let everyone know about the amazing giveaway that you're going to be offering to somebody. So thank you for just sharing that, your energy and your services and just your outlook and philosophy of life is so inspiring. And I know people who are listening are also even more inspired to declutter and just to be simple. Live simply. That's the sign I have in front of my house when you walk in, And interestingly enough, it's next to a little miniature Bodhi tree. So
adorable. Oh, kindred spirits.
I was hoping if you can share a little bit more about the awesome giveaway that you're going to be sharing.
Of course. So I have two different workbooks that I use with clients. So the first workbook is a sustainable and affordable living workbook. So this is for those who are looking to downsize, those who are looking to start their tiny house journey. So the components of the workbook are that they have different reflection sheets where you can write down your vision, where you can get your thoughts on paper and you can start organizing those. And then there's a whole section on how to actually organize your home. And so every room in your home gets its own separate sheet and that sheet organizes, things to fix, things to move, things to get rid of, things to sell. So you can just organize that all in one tidy place. And then further into the workbook is a complete kind of financial assessment. So it goes through what types of finances that we do have, what types of, and then, it has a complete budget sheet that includes every expense you could pretty much imagine. You write all that down. And we work together to see what you can start eliminating. One of the things that we had to do as a family was start eliminating expenses. And that, brought us hundreds of extra dollars a month we didn't even really consider. And so I just help people kind of really understand what that looks like, and the workbook really helps. I also sell the workbook separately, so you can kind of start that journey on your own without, paying for coaching. And then the second workbook is the Organize My Move workbook. So that is how I help clients organize their house to move, organize their house to list, or just organize their house to make it work for them and make it flow. So a lot of it is explaining minimalism, purposeful living, multi-purpose space design, and different things like that. And then again, that has worksheets for every room where you can go through every room and start decluttering and start purging and just keeping it all in one nice tidy area. I find organization is really the key to a lot of this, other than the mindset practices. So that's a giveaway. Whoever wins the giveaway will be able to choose which workbook they want, whatever is most reflective of what they need. And then they get an hour free with me. If it's in the area, then I'll come to you. And if not, virtual, we do a home tour and we talk for an hour and we go through the workbook together.
Wow. I definitely, if we talked a week ago, that second workbook would be just working wonders in this case for sure, Thank you so much, Bianca, for chatting with me today and for joining me. It's been such a great conversation, and I'm excited for whoever gets to win, their time with you and get to experience your services. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting my interview in my car.
No worries.
Like I said, tiny house problem. Thank you so much. This was so wonderful.
No problem.